Hey, I'm Peter from Media65. What is the best choice to film interviews? A smartphone, a mirrorless camera, or eventually a classic camcorder? Let's dive in. Last week, a client of mine, he reached out to me because they wanted to film some interviews and a couple of B-rolls. And they found these cameras here on the internet, wanted to buy two of them and asked me whether they would be the right choice or not. So I had a look at the specifications and I had to write him back, no, sorry, they're not suitable for interviews. But it made me think a little bit, what are the right criteria that you need to apply before buying a camera to film some interviews? Let's break this down here and let's compare the different types of cameras that you usually have. A smartphone, mirrorless camera, and the classic camcorders. There are a couple of very well-defined criteria I apply before buying a camera for interviews. The first and most important criteria is clearly the sound quality. Most of you who are a little bit familiar with my channel here know that I have no mercy for bad sound. And this is of course important for interviews, because best image quality will not save your interview if the sound is completely crappy. And that's exactly why each and every interview camera needs to have a microphone input if you don't want to rely on the crappy microphones which are usually built into the cameras. No, you need to be able to connect professional microphones on your camera. Almost equally important is the headphone output, because you need to monitor the sound that you're recording. Imagine that you're recording for almost 1 hour an interview. You go back to your post-production just to figure out that the sound is bad. Then you need to return, you need to set up everything, you need to mobilize again the people, and that's almost a disaster. The second criteria is of course the image quality. Most of today's cameras, they have a pretty decent image quality, which is largely enough to film good interviews. 4K is something which is very important because in the post-production you might want to reframe the interview as well. But besides the pure quality, there is more the aesthetic view as well. Professional interviews today, they come with a blurred background, the cinematic appearance, and that's something which cannot be easily achieved by every camera. And the third criteria is also the recording time. Not with every camera, you may be able to record an interview which lasts 30 minutes or 60 minutes or sometimes even more. So that's also a criteria that you need to look after when you buy a pretty decent interview camera. Most modern smartphones, they don't have anymore an audio input where you can easily connect a 3.5 mini jack with a microphone, but you can connect microphones over USB-C, which is a de facto standard also to connect microphones. So it's quite easy today to connect a Rode Wireless Pro, a DJI Mic, a Holy Landmark M2, or any other microphone which is on the market today that comes with a USB-C connectivity. So connecting the microphone itself, even professional ones, on a smartphone and record in professional quality is not the biggest challenge. Monitoring the sound is a little bit more tricky because most of the smartphones, they don't have a headphone output anymore, so you cannot simply connect your headphone and monitor the sound. If you're using an application like the Blackmagic Camera app, then you're lucky because you can define what kind of device you want to use to monitor the sound. Even Bluetooth headphones, and that works surprisingly well, so you can really control the sound while you're recording. If you're using another application, then you need to rely that your microphone dongle that you're using, that it has a 3.5mm output where you can connect a headphone, and that it's also loud enough also that you can hear it without any problems. Some other dongles, like the Holy Landmark M2 for example, they come with a USB-C connector where you can connect an adapter which converts again the audio signal USB-C to 3.5mm jack, and you can connect again here your headphones on it. Most recent mirrorless cameras, they always come with a microphone input, and most of them as well also with a headphone output. Nevertheless, I would always double check before you buy a camera that they really have a headphone output, because there's still some out there that don't have this headphone output. The problem is, if you don't have the headphone output, you're really out of luck because there is no other possibility. So that's why the criteria is always very important: headphone output, microphone input for a mirrorless camera. But except for that, they make it quite easy also to connect all kinds of microphones on it and record, of course, in a very decent quality. Camcorders are a little bit similar to mirrorless cameras. That means the good ones, they come actually with a microphone input and a headphone output. But there are a lot of camcorders out there on the market which don't come neither with the input nor with the output, and as such you have to rely clearly on the built-in microphone, which is definitely a bad idea. The most recent smartphones, they have an image quality which is largely enough to film really good interviews. So from this perspective, I don't see any problem with the smartphone filming your interviews. 4K resolution, sometimes even already today 8K resolution, that's largely enough. So no problem from this perspective. But when it comes to the aesthetic, then this might be a caveat. Because as I mentioned before, the aesthetics is more this blurred background in the background to make the interview more cinematic. And that's something, from a technical perspective, is not possible organically with a smartphone camera. That's why you need to rely on a smartphone that they have a portrait mode or a cinematic mode where the background blur is artificially added to the image. And that sometimes works quite well, but sometimes it might not work very well and looks then a little bit more artificial. On the other hand, if you're using a decent camera app, then you have access, of course, also to all the different manual features, and as such, a smartphone can really be used as a professional camera. Almost all mirrorless cameras today come with a whole set of manual features where you can really parameter the images, tweak it in a way that you need it, and align it to your workflow, which is great. And at the same time, you buy, of course, with the mirrorless camera a system which is expandable. The camcorder sits kind of between the smartphone and the mirrorless camera. Typically, the sensor of the camcorder is a little bit bigger than the ones of the smartphone. That means the image quality is for sure decent, and especially also in low light, it might be a little bit better than for smartphones. But on the other hand, you will never be able to achieve this blurred background that you can do with a mirrorless camera. Technically, this is simply not possible, and as you cannot add any different lens on the camcorder, you're kind in a dead end when it comes to a camcorder. So you have to use the camcorder as it is. If you're happy with it, fine, but don't expect any miracles and don't expect that you can upgrade kind of to the cinematic experience. So you need to be very careful when you choose your camcorder to look at the specifications and to make sure that this specific camcorder that you might want to buy really gives you access to all that you want. Otherwise, you might end up really with a camcorder which is recording, but not more, and that might be a pity actually. When it comes to recording duration, smartphones can record for a very long time, so that's technically not a problem. But the storage might be the problem. Typically, video files tend to become very big and interviews might be very long, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. This might happen absolutely, so you need to have enough space on your phone, and storage on the phone is pretty expensive. So you need to buy a smartphone which has 500 GB or 1 TB or sometimes even more if you want to be on the safe side to have enough space to record a lot of interviews. If that's not possible, then you might choose a telephone where you have the possibility to connect an SSD over USB-C, which is possible on the latest iPhones, which makes it convenient also to record for hours if you want to. But on the other hand, you have additional device that you need to connect, which might make it a little bit more difficult. Mirrorless cameras are made to record for a long time, of course. So they have usually one SD card slot, some even the professional ones have even a second SD card slot, and you can record without any problems for hours without running out of storage. And if you're running out of storage, you just change the SD card and you go ahead. But with mirrorless cameras, especially with the small and very compact ones, there might be a problem with overheating. They are so compact that they're heating up during the interview or during longer recording times, and then it might happen that they simply switch off because they say, oh, I'm getting too hot, so I don't want to record now anymore. Then you need to wait for a couple of minutes before you can switch them on again and keep on recording. Camcorders are pretty easygoing here. Most of them, they have just simply a built-in SD card slot, but there might be also some on the market which are relying only on internal storage, and then it might be quite limited. So double check before you buy a camcorder what kind of storage they're using. When it comes to the recording time, most of the camcorders, they have a very long recording time, so you can record as long as you want without any problems, and usually overheating issues should also not be a problem in this case because they are made simply to record very long. If you really want to go for professional interviews, then probably you don't have any other choice except for going for a mirrorless camera, because a mirrorless camera gives you this organic blurred background, interchangeable lenses, all the connectivity that you typically need, plus access, of course, also to the features that you need. But I would also not rule out smartphones to film interviews, because first of all, it's very easy in the meanwhile to connect high-quality microphones over USB-C to the smartphones. The cinematic or portrait modes, they become better and better, and if you have a little bit control over the lighting situation, then you might have an outcome, especially with a blurred background also in cinematic modes, which is pretty stunning and very close actually to a mirrorless camera. And then last but not least, camcorders. Well, it's hard to recommend now a camcorder to film some interviews, mainly because you're pretty much limited. You have to go for a little bit higher priced model to get microphone input, headphone output, and then still you don't have what you have in a mirrorless camera. That means the nice blurred background, the bokeh effect, and there is no way actually that you could upgrade the camcorder just in order to have this visually compelling effect. So from this perspective, I believe that a camcorder can be great to film some B-rolls, to have it with you, to have something which is really uncomplicated. But filming interviews with it, I don't think that I would do it, because there are more compelling alternatives. Well, I hope you liked this, and don't forget to, of course, like my channel. And now I want to see your results. Send in if you're filming something, show me your commands, and I hope to see you very soon again on this channel. And now I know that you can do it.